Of the freedom camping bylaw. Who led this? One? So Andrew.
Yes, he was the chair of the panel, and David and I were on the.
All right. So, good one, right. So, do we have any questions? Yep, Phil.
I just have one, and I support the recommendations in option one, but what I guess one of the concerns, and almost like a risk in the report, is maybe on that page, is although we're closing, we're not going to be allowing these places to be available for freedom campers. There is reference in the report that implies that in fact the problem may well just move on and move somewhere else. And so I guess my question is, are we able to look at how we actually, while we do the full review, are we able to actually make sure that we do some planning for the future so that we have some, I guess, can be proactive to look at how we manage this in the future too?
I guess the answer to that is yes. I think that this is very much a partial review dealing specifically with the non-self-contained camping at this stage, but the full review gives us a chance to look at not only all of the bylaw, but really to look at what other methods, other techniques, other avenues you can use to address this issue. Because of course when you review a bylaw, you also have to look at whether it's the most appropriate and what other means you can use to achieve the same or better effect.
There's also the Canterbury Regional Visitor Strategy, which specifically mentions freedom camping and looking at freedom camping across the whole of the region and looking at the infrastructure requirements for that. So that work is also ongoing, not just through our bylaw program.
Look, I thought that I'd got the information that, because I was going to share it with everyone, but unfortunately I've only got the remit as it was put to the LGNZ conference. So I'll just read from their press statement. New Zealand's South Island councils have called for changes to legislation to enable local government to more effectively control the negative issues associated with freedom camping and seek a working group of central and local government and the tourism industry to shape this as an urgent priority. What the remit actually said, and I was a little bit involved in getting this in front of the conference with the support of the mover and the seconder of the motion that was already there, which was moved by Tasman and seconded by Southland, is that we need a New Zealand-wide approach to this from the visitor experience and from the visitor experience point of view and from the protection of the environment. So actually both need to be balanced against each other, because you can't tell a tourist coming into New Zealand, we've got one set of rules in this council, another set of rules in that council, one set of rules in the South Island, another set in the North Island, one set of rules for dockland and another set of rules for council land, and by the way, you can't tell the difference between them. So what the remit actually asks for is for the working party to come together and to seek consistency across the country between dockland and council land, so all public land, that the rules are known from the get-go. And then the Tasman resolution makes good sense because it has a mechanism for ensuring that infringements are actually able to be enforced. So I think that was a very sensible approach at local government New Zealand level, and that was endorsed by 97% of the votes cast. So there was widespread support for consistency across New Zealand, and I think having individual bylaws is not the way to go. So yeah, David.
Thank you. I agree entirely, and a joined up approach is definitely the better way to go. In the short term, however, we are stuck with a bylaw approach to it, and my question really to staff is, I support the thrust of where we're going now. What is going to be the impact on our enforcement team in terms of their ability to enforce the bylaw, and are we resourced enough to look after this, and do we need to be looking at our enforcement approach to specifically now just having non-self-contained camping in quite a wide and large area to look after?
From an enforcement perspective, the area that requires to be covered is large, and that means that practically speaking there is only a limited amount of resources that we can actually apply to that in terms of monitoring. What it does mean is that we will be able to apply a similar approach as we have done in previous years, in that we will have an amount of proactive monitoring available, and there will also be reactive monitoring to complaints. That means that obviously from a complaint perspective we can target specific areas and we can make sure that we send staff to those specific areas. We also know as well through the work that we've done with our rangers and also our parking staff that we can more readily now identify those areas that are causing issues, and it means that we can target our resources there appropriately. So if you want a all bells and whistles monitoring approach, it would cost a considerable amount of money. It's not practical given the extent of the area that we've got, but we certainly can and will work within the resources that we do have to ensure that we can try and provide as robust a monitoring system as possible. The reality of it is that with splitting between self-contained and non-self-contained vehicles, that it actually makes the job of monitoring significantly easier in a way, because you're actually clearly able to identify those vehicles that are not classed as being self-contained and then take the appropriate action at an earlier stage.
And just a second question then, I note in the report that while not directly relevant to the criteria under the bylaw, the amendment may have some negative impact on economic and other benefits for tourism. Tourists who prefer free camping options are likely to make fewer or shorter visits to Christchurch. Are we looking at any, I know this is probably maybe a bit outside your scope, it's probably more for Helen and Brendan. Are we looking at any publicity or other proactive measures to retain the tourist, the camper van tourist industry in coming to Christchurch, but not as freedom campers? What we don't want to see is an economic loss to the city for these people. There were a lot of huge numbers last summer, and actually now making Christchurch and Greater Christchurch a undesirable place to visit. So how are we going to counter that?
I think it's about getting that balance. So the predominant effect of this proposed bylaw would be for the non-self-contained campers, and notwithstanding the council has a bylaw that obviously communication of that bylaw is most effective through the mechanisms that freedom campers use, which is by and large the Campermate and the camping.com.co.nz website. So if you've looked at that website, what it does is it synthesises our bylaw and every other bylaw of councils across the country into about 5 lines, and it's very straightforward and easy to follow. So what we will be doing is making sure that via those other methods that the alternatives, including the campgrounds and the backpackers, that these same people use in other locations with the identical bylaw, so Huronui, Queenstown Lakes, things like that. So these issues aren't unfamiliar to them. We need to make sure that we communicate that well in Christchurch City.
Yeah. Good.
Glenn?
Thank you. On page, just got it here, 173, it talks about simplicity or greater clarity around the messaging. I was going to ask Fiona too, just in terms of, will it make for greater clarity if we go for the preferred option over operation as well? So we're just slimming it right down to self-contained, so it'll make it easier from your perspective
Yeah, it definitely makes the messaging simpler. It makes it much more streamlined, and it's very easy then for everyone to understand. And it is very familiar to a lot of people who are freedom camping around the country.
And from a compliance perspective as well, it makes your lives a lot easier.
It makes it much easier to differentiate between, because we can clearly identify those vehicles that are certified self-contained from those vehicles that aren't.
NZMCA requires the certification for.
So the certification process is a New Zealand standard. NZM's New Zealand Motor Caravan Association do administer the standard, and they have a number of inspectors who will certify vehicles, but there are also a number of inspectors who work for other private outfits who also certify vehicles on their behalf.
Okay.
Yanni?
So just so I'm clear, we're putting this out for consultation. We're not making the final decision today.
Yes.
So a number of questions and comments that have been made as though this is like the final thing. So this is going out for public consultation.
Yes.
And in the report, in the thing that goes out for consultation, are we going to have the different options?
No.
Can I ask why not?
It's actually it's the part of the legal requirement, you put out your preferred option, and that
you consult on the proposal.
And you consult on it. You consult on the proposal, and the proposal is what you decide.
So the question there that we ask people will only be whether they support the proposal or not. So if people have other ideas, and we heard some of those last time through dedicated facilities for freedom campers to go to, or so forth, that's all kind of ruled out of this consultation.
That's not part of this particular consultation, which is just aimed at changing the provision for non-self-contained freedom camping.
Okay.
Conceivably, when we do the full review of the bylaw, we might, have a more variety, as it were, in the proposal. But this is a very narrow consultation.
So just in terms of, since the temporary ban has been put in place, how many complaints have we had about freedom camping in the city?
In terms of, for those sites in particular, the levels have decreased dramatically to pretty much 0 complaints about any of the 5 particular sites that were identified originally. And in terms of freedom camping per se across the district, we would probably average somewhere around about 10 to a dozen complaints per week, but that can incorporate a number of different parameters. So it may well be a case of abandoned vehicles that get reported perhaps as being freedom camping initially, or perhaps people pitching tents in an appropriate area, and it can also be related obviously to homeless factors too.
And how does that compare, final question, how does that compare to the number of complaints we got before we had a bylaw specifying that people couldn't freedom camp?
So we saw, in terms of comparison with last year, and obviously we've got different numbers in terms of the total number of people that we were identifying camping in the district. With the bylaw in place, we actually saw a significant increase in the number of complaints, but they were specifically related to the 5 sites and the issues that were generated at those sites. In the preceding summer period, we also had a reasonably large number of complaints, and they were directed again at specific sites, and that would be, for example, some of the areas in New Brighton, Akaroa. So there were certainly hotspots, and have been hotspots that have been ongoing over at least the 2 previous summers and past that too. So complaints about freedom camping are an ongoing thing. There is always a residual level of complaints about that activity, but in terms of over the summer period, obviously we get significant ones.
In terms of the report back to us after the thing, can you include a report in the report about complaints, so that we've got a full understanding of that when we make the actual decision? And I want to add one to it as well, which is the impact that our bylaw the original bylaw, had on our existing camping sites. Because that's one piece of information that I don't think I've seen, which is what did the Freedom camping sites do to legitimate camping sites, camping grounds? South New Brighton, Spencerville, what's the park down Linwood Ave? That one called?
Linwood Holiday Park, I don't know. Something like
The holiday park down Linwood Ave. I mean, I've got an anecdotal response from South New Brighton. I mean, the tenants are no longer there, but they said that it was a 30% reduction in their normal usage.
Yep.
And their usage hadn't gone down since the earthquakes until we brought in the Freedom Camping Bylaw. So I want to know all of that actual information, not anecdotal advice, you know, from operators. I want to know the facts about the impact.
We'll absolutely do the best that we can there. Just it might be more prudent, given the timeframes of this proposal, to go out in the enactment of the bylaw in anticipation of the summer season, to allow the summer season to run, and then we can more fully also come back to that if we can't completely traverse it in this. When we come back to council with feedback from the proposal.
We're talking half a dozen camping grounds. It's a question of just asking them. So, but you know, I would like them asked. Yeah, Paul.
Just a quick question, just following on from what Yanni's line of questioning was, what was the biggest source of complaints? Where did they come from? Was it from the self-contained Freedom Camping vehicles, or was it the non-self-contained Freedom Camping vehicles?
At least 90% from talking to staff was non-self-contained.
So you could actually reasonably assume that actually the biggest problem we have through this whole thing is through the non-self-contained units.
Yes, almost entirely. It's quite hard actually to, prior to the Freedom Camping Bylaw, the fact is that people could camp non-self-contained pretty well anywhere. It's interesting that, you know, when we brought in the bylaw, that the areas where non-self-contained could camp were greatly reduced in actual fact. But that's where they chose to go.
And I also have anecdotal...
But it's the mechanism for advertising the bylaw that actually became the problem. Because it was just like, come here and set up camp.
Yes.
And I also have anecdotal evidence that actually us having a Freedom Camping Bylaw has actually reduced patronage to other motor camps or places where motor vehicles can park up. So
but I'm hoping that the Working Party will come up with a nationwide solution, because I think individual bylaws is not the way to go. I think our experience has reinforced that. We do not want to send a bad message to Freedom campers. We do not want to diminish their visitor experience, but we don't want to damage our environment, and we want to make it good for everyone, not just visitors, but for our own people. So it's got to be a balanced approach, and personally I think it should be centrally based for the whole of the country, so that there's one set of rules that kind of guide people in terms of what they can and can't do in New Zealand. Anyway, so who's going to move the motion?
I'm happy to move that.
Paul, seconded David. Is there any discussion?
I'd like to speak to it for
Yep.
a second. Look, very quickly, I think this is a good move. It does reduce the potential for non-self-contained campers to migrate to other areas, which obviously was our huge problem last summer. I am a little concerned about the monitoring side of it. We do have a huge area, but I'm sure that this move will actually potentially make the monitoring somewhat easier than it was last summer. And just the other point that I raised earlier about the negative impact on our economy, and I would like to see that the camper van industry and those that do hire it do get the right information, and that we are not seen to be a city that is trying to deter Freedom campers from coming to our city. Indeed, we do want them here, We want to protect our environment, and we don't want the sort of issues that we had last summer. So I think the move that we are making here is a very good one in the short term until we have the ability to either review our bylaw again, or as the Mayor has said, the better approach longer term is for a nationwide approach to the camping, freedom camping issue, where people that come to our country then get the message that is unified across the nation, and hopefully the issues that we have and a number of other territorial authorities have experienced are sidelined to a large degree. So I will support the motion.
Yeah, Yanni.
Thank you. I think the important thing is we're putting this out for consultation. So, you know, I think the interesting thing for once we get the feedback and look at what people say is the question whether we don't have a ban on something can just, you know, happen organically like it used to, or whether we put a ban in, and effectively what's the difference between the two. So having a ban citywide that we simply cannot enforce because of the resources, is that the right approach versus not having a ban at all? And actually I don't see a lot of difference between the two. I think the problem was that when we identified sites without the infrastructure, then suddenly we created a place where people could easily target to go camping, and obviously that has led to a number of issues. I just want to thank the staff. I went out and had a look at Windswap Park, and you know, I know some of the maintenance and the ongoing legacy of having intensive freedom camping did some damage, but I know certainly from what I've seen that that's been tidied up, so thank you for getting on to that. The only other point I wish to make is that I think we should, I totally endorse the comment that we should talk to the local campgrounds as well, because it would be interesting to see what capacity they have, and I do wonder whether or not we should be thinking about a sort of regional campground strategy as well. So are there areas where freedom campers are going that don't have facilities, or are there facilities that with some improvement could actually cater to an increased number? So I accept that maybe it's better to do that as part of the overall bylaw review, and maybe that working party at central level may address some of that. But I do think, I know one of the concerns previously has been the reduction of camping grounds in our city, including the peninsula, and you know, I think it would be a real shame not to have somewhere where people can go, even if it is a private or a public camping ground, but that they can camp in a respectful way. So thank you for the work you're doing on it. Look forward to the results coming in.
Yep.
Look, I think this is straightforward in terms of this review at this stage, but I think the staff have also indicated that the problem isn't going to go away. Clearly, having a national working party will help resolve a lot of issues, but you know, there'll be an ongoing, somehow or other, and Yanni's referred to this, we have to be proactive in looking at how we use our own current camping grounds, and also how we actually may need to make some other facilities available for freedom campers, and I put it in inverted commas because clearly freedom campers too should contribute their share of the costs to this, not just ratepayers. Having said that, I think we have to be careful, given that we've got a huge tourism wave, as David East referred to, that in fact freedom campers are likely to continue to be part of this, and we have to be careful not to demonise them. In my experience at the Addington Park actually was because we didn't have facilities for them and huge numbers came. That's where the problems really began. So while this is just a partial review, I think we need to think proactively, and there's been a lot of reference to our current camping grounds as to how we manage that, because clearly we cannot afford just to have the problem shifted somewhere else. But I am very pleased that at a national level we're likely to get some consistency through that working party.
Very good. All right. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you. And thank you very much for all of the work that you've done so far and the work you're about to do. The next